For everyone will open their books to 1246, or, as I was saying in Japanese, hon o kete onegaishimasu. Page 3246 in 1246.
Which book though?
Orange book. The book we're supposed to have at this point on. This is past the midpoint. Alright, so, question.
Well, there were some people that were still doing the
Who
book last
has
week,
read
so.
the 3 stories I intend to cover?
I saw your email.
Okay, so, of our illustrious many, who cares to mention some of the overarching themes in the book? That
It's mighty funny that he got with the anonymous lady with no name. He didn't know
the
nothing.
lady Akashi. Yes. Well, that's actually one of the funny things about this story. Love. It's one of the huge elements of the story. That would be pronounced ski, or as it would more formally be known, daisuki, for great love. Now it's interesting because this is the kanji for woman, this is the kanji for child. So a woman's relationship with her child, that strong bond. And when you add the kanji big, it means a very great and powerful love. So that is, of course, one of the main elements. Another element is death. Shine. Because if you read at the end, in the rites, his love, the lady Murakashi, the lady of the court, she fades away and dies. He holds her in his arms and madness takes him before he finally regains himself. Now, of course, Genji is a tale that was told about the year 1000, and it's basically being told by a lady at the court, a lady in waiting, Murakashi, who is telling the tale to the other ladies of the court. And so now I made a nice little introduction. I'll let everybody watch.
And that was not a quick read, it was a long.
Yes, but you had, I told you about it last week. I was supposed to present it then, but I didn't, so I gave you a whole other week. So you actually had spring break and all of last week. So
Right.
That's insulting.
okay, you can't possibly be doing everything all spring break, okay?
But that took a long time.
皆さん、おはよう。今日は源氏物語を話します。日本語の文化が一番目、そして最主要な文学です。
Was you reading or you was?
I was supposed to say that I didn't read all of it. And here we're I'll turn it down a little bit now. This is the music of the Japanese instrument known as the koto. Oddly enough, it's an instrument that is made by using the belly of a cat.
The belly of a cat?
Yes, which is actually much more common in musical instruments than you might think. Believe me, when I read about this the first time, I was a little bit shocked too. So anyway, as I was saying, it's about Lady Murakashi Shikibu, and she was a lady waiting in the court of the emperor. And it's considered to be one of the world's first novels. Now, of course, here's Genji. He was known as Hikaru Genji, or Shining Genji. He was the son of the emperor, destined for greatness. But because of political reasons, he was actually knocked down to the status of commoner, being given the name Genji Minamoto. When he was exiled from the court, he began a long life. But he was a great warrior and a very handsome fellow. So one of the things about this book, he had many, many loves. It's actually one of those things that humorously, you hear about anime having the harem comedies. Well, this was the first harem. This guy was he had several wives, and he also, strange enough, had many women who he took and actually started calling his daughter, which you'll hear about more in Fireflies. Now, the main tales I'm focusing on are, of course, Lady Akashi, Fireflies, and the Rights. Now, what you see here is one of the early transcripts from the 1900s when they actually took and translated this into Japanese for the modern dialect. Because when this story was written, with less than 200 years, the Japanese language had evolved more so, and it was practically unreadable. So it was carried on more in a oral tradition, and it was eventually translated, and it was actually brought to the English language by Virginia Woolf, who did the translation. A translation done by Arthur Whaley in 1925. But it's really interesting to think that this was done because Japanese is the Japanese society is very male-driven. It's not equal. It's not equal. There, in modern-day society, on Valentine's Day, the women can spend $300 or so on chocolates, whereas men might only spend 30 or 40 on White Day a month later. A legitimate proposal to your wife is, I would like you to fix my miso soup every morning. Or I would like you to shine my shoes every morning. This is a legitimate proposal in today's society in Japan. That's one of those things that not very many women in the world would handle it. And actually, that's one of the reasons why foreigners are so successful with Japanese women, because they tend to be romantic. And, this is being a concept they're not used to, tends to sweep them off their feet. Now, the first story, the Lady of Akashi. After Genji has been exiled, and he was married at the age of 12 to his first wife, who was 16 at the time. Which, kind of odd if you think about it in historical context, where typically the man is much older, but he was the son of the emperor, so, he's not worried about being established. Now, on his journey to Akashi, he is beset by many hardships. There's a great storm, and he constantly is praying to Buddha to deliver him and his men, and and he's receiving correspondence from the Lady Murasaki, who is, of course, a fictional character in the story, as well as the name of the woman who wrote the actual story herself. Now, on his journey, she tells about how it's like a punishment from the gods has been levied upon the people, so great are the storms they're incurring. Well, he goes on this journey and eventually makes it to Akashi, where finally the weather lets up and he meets a monk. This monk has a daughter who is, of course, very well versed, and the monk, having aspirations towards higher things, knowing who Genji is, essentially sells the idea to Genji to become involved with his daughter. They begin a long line of correspondences by letter, and she is so eloquent, despite having no training in the ways of the court, and her ability to play the koto, as we were hearing earlier, was so great that he fell in love without ever having met her. And they continued corresponding for quite some time, and he actually wrote back to his wife, Murakashi, and told her that he was going to marry this woman as well.
Okay.
And so he meets her for the first time. And when he does, he's very forward, because he thinks that the relationship's a lot more than what it is. But she is immediately backed down. She immediately backs away and is offended because it's forwardness. Because she didn't realize how much her father had been pushing her to be in the relationship. Now, of course, he did win her over and did marry her, and their daughter actually went on to become the empress, which is kind of a interesting little twist. Now, the second story, Fireflies. It involves when later on Genji's still in Akashi, and he has adopted a daughter, Tamakazura, who is actually Tono Chujo's daughter. And during this whole story, Tono Chujo is actually having these strange dreams about Buddha and righteousness, and of course that his daughter is actually Tamakusa. And so, he spends his whole time as his undertone, but at the same time, Genji, who's his daughter, he's trying to actually marry her off to the Prince Hontaru. And he arranged for them to meet between a veil for the first time and have her be seen to him by the light of fireflies. Now, eventually they do become involved, but that's much later on. And you were going to...
Is there a ceremony like that with fireflies and...
Well, it's more of a... there are a lot of ceremonies done to the point, especially during like spring and summer, when the fireflies are going to be prevalent. There are connotations done to it, kind of like every year with the cherry blossom ceremony. It just has it has important significance, and it's used as a literary device in this case. Because, if you've seen being lit by fireflies, it's kind of a stretch to consider her to be fully illuminated by the fireflies and for him to catch the silhouette of her beauty and, fall in love. But, it's literature. Kind of had to take a little bit here and there. But, it's mostly about the symbols. You going to say? Okay. All right, and of course we'll now move on to the final of the three stories. And that it would be the rites. Genji finally being able to return many years later to the capital, which is Kyoto, which is the ancient capital of Japan. Because this would be during the Heian Dynasty, which happened, it was about 900, see, I think I have it written down actually. Well, anyway, it was about between 900 and 1200 Common Era, CE. And, of course, this taking place about 1000. This is, pretty much during the height of the Heian period. Well, when he returns back to Kyoto, he finds that Murasaki has taken ill. And she is ill for a very long period of time, but even though as she's wasting away, her beauty is so great that it doesn't fade. And eventually death takes her. And of course we see in this illustration a picture of him after she has passed, and he's completely beset by grief. And he actually goes not mad with just grief, but eventually calms himself down to perform the ceremonial rites of the funeral. And it's a really tragic passing. The entire court mourns this loss because she was such an important part of the court. And now, of course, one of the things about this is that there is the constant mention of the religions. Now, one of the interesting things is that there are two main religions in Japan, albeit neither of them are typically claimed. The Japanese will tell you they're not a religious people, but they have many rites. The first and most joyous of the rites is that of Shinto, which is it's divinity in everything. Everything has a spirit. Everything has an importance about it. And they take this to be that, this pen right here would have a spirit about it. That desk, anything does. And it's used for more lighthearted ceremonies such as coming of age ceremonies, and just happy parts in life, marriages. But you have the second element, and that of Buddhism, which typically deals with death. And of course, in believing in Buddhism, there is the belief of rebirth. But there is sometimes a passing of relationships between that, but it's not a guaranteed thing. And these Buddhist events are more somber, and they have things like when you are having a funeral ceremony, you will take a bowl of rice and stick chopsticks straight up in it, and that is a gift to the dead. when someone passes, you'll keep you'll keep an altar of them usually, if they're very important to you. You'll have a picture of them and a candle, and maybe some incense, and you would light it when you want to take and pray for their future, for their spirit, for their soul. And it's just, and of course, when he's facing these hardships and these losses, it's Buddhism he goes to, because that's very much the system they fall into, and when they come upon things that could be potential life-ending or actual life-ending ceremonies. Interesting note about that: Buddhists get paid on tips, and if you want to make a lot of money in Japan, you can go be a Buddhist priest. They make a lot of money. Just saying,
Religion for fun and profit.
To bring some levity to the terrible death and horrible things, depressing stuff.
So, I have a question.
Yes.
Would I be right in thinking that there's no such thing as a Buddhist wedding?
Oh, that would not be something that they would typically go for in Japan. That may be elsewhere, but Buddhism is it's reserved mostly for somber occasions.
Right.
And now one other thing I do want to mention on before I go is in the Japanese there are the elements of writing. Now the Japanese writing system came from China. Of course, it was brought over several times. So you have things like multiple readings. You'll have one kanji that means one particular thing, but it's used in several contexts, such as when you have, you may remember when I was writing, when I put the kanji up for water in Chinese, shui. Now, that could be read as shui, or it could be read as mizu, because of when it being brought over by the Chinese. It was all it's all due to trade. So you have this right here, which is shui, which if you put it next to that is suyobi, Wednesday. But if you put it with that would be mizu or nomimasu, which is I'm drinking water. And it's all context-based. Now, one thing you might notice is that you have things like this, which actually are a writing system that was developed called hiragana, because you have three main writing systems in Japanese: the hiragana, katakana, and the kanji. Now, hiragana actually was developed by women as a secret code because they weren't allowed to learn the katakana, which is men only. The thing about hiragana is it's very curvy, whereas this right here, if you have it in katakana, very angular. It's still but the katakana was the official language that was used by the men because, as I was saying earlier, male-dominant society, so there is not the equality. Women weren't taught how to write in that, so they just formed their own. And now you use this for, nowadays though, hiragana is actually used for native Japanese words as well as the kanji. But a word such as arubaito is a German word that means part-time work. And so it will be used in the katakana. So just a little bit of food for thought for the Japanese writing system. Oh, well, thank you.